Welcome to Journey's Special Edition. My name is Denise Hurley, and I am here with Jason Allison. I'd like to welcome Jason Allison.
Hi, Denise.
To Journeys. He is running for a 3-year seat on the Lancaster Selectboard. Welcome, Jason.
Hi, Denise. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
It's good. It's a Friday. It's a beautiful day outside. Looking forward to it.
Yes. Before we get into the reasons why you're running, I'd like to know a little bit about you. It does look like you've been involved in different aspects of the town for some years, but tell me a little bit about you, your family, who you are, your experience.
Awesome. So I'm Jason Allison. I'm a resident of Lancaster. Married about 19 years. My wife Leslie. I've got 3 children: Alex, who's 16, Andrew, 14, and Nathan, 11. And they attend Neshoba Regional High School through Burbank Middle School, respectively. My wife Leslie is actively serving for over 10 years on the Commission of Disability. So for work, I'm a director of software engineering at an engineering firm in Marlborough. My role at that company is to be a technical leader for the company's software products. And things that I focus on there are build and fostering great teams, but it also includes innovation and execution, ultimately driving team collaboration to bring results. But that's for work. So in the town, currently been on the Town Forest Committee for over 7 years. I've also led the Lancaster Cub Scouts for 4 years. That was a super great experience for me. Currently, I actively lead the MRE Luther Burbank Middle School Lancaster Ski Club. And what that is a program run through the school with Wachusett Ski that allows any child an opportunity to experience Wachusett at a discounted rate. So, I have and continue to partner with hundreds of Lancaster families. It's really been just a wonderful experience in town and the people that I've met. So for me personally, we're kind of an outside family. We like to get out, whether it's in the town forest or Cook, Dexter, Drumlin. For me, I like to compete in triathlons. So I'm a triathlete. I spend a good amount of time at the Lancaster Town Beach, riding bikes around town, running. Folks may see me on the road. So that's a little bit about me and my history here in town.
Wow, sounds like you're quite busy. All those
with 3 kids, it's hard.
Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. So, why are you running? What are you bringing to this town seat that would improve the quality of the life of town residents?
Ultimately, I think like all town residents, at some level, we all want to make a difference in Lancaster. For me personally, I want to leverage my strengths, and I think I talked a little bit about them earlier. Team building, transparency, driving results, and execution. And in my opinion today, I see a lack of collaboration, amongst some of our boards and committees, like the Selectboard, some of the town committees, and town citizens. The reality is, we've got amazing people in town, and on all of our boards, whether that's elected or appointed, we also have many others who want to help. We're really fortunate on that front to have that participation level. But today, it doesn't feel like we're bringing those resources together. And what I want to do is work on behalf of the town, to change this for the better. And I think, like I mentioned in the beginning, my strengths can really, align with doing those things. So that's what motivated me to run.
Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. So the Finance Committee, how would you work with them? This committee makes a lot of decisions for the town. They develop the budget. They recommend to the board. How do you think you could develop an alliance with them, those folks on the committee?
Yeah, great question. I already have existing friendly relationships with some of the board members, so I've got a little bit of a head start there. But I also have working relationships through the Town Forest Committee. So we did a harvest plan through the Town Forest. What was entailed in that is we needed to put a harvest plan together. So you need to pay to have that done. We had to go to the FinCom get monies allocated. And part of that was about setting expectations on what would be returned to the town as part of the harvest. So there's already a partnership there. And, that went off without a hitch. I think it was all very positive. The reality is, I think as kind of you're hinting at there, FinCom, they've got a really challenging role. My experience is that they're, a well-organized and driven team. To me, it feels like, they have the desire to make things right for Lancaster, and that's a positive for our town. So for me, I don't have any concerns on the collaboration front. I feel like they'd be an excellent partner with me on the slip.
Okay. So they kind of know who you are. They've worked with you before on some of the projects with the town forest. So you guys are comfortable. I think it's Jay Riley who is the chair, if I'm not mistaken. So you and he could probably work together very well. Do you think?
I think Jay's a great guy. I've known him for a number of years.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Okay. Go to communication in the town. Do you feel the townspeople aren't being heard by the President's Select Board? And what might be your plan to improve the communication for the residents of Lancaster and the Select Board? What would you do?
Yeah, this is really important to me. So in my role, any role, whether it's through ski club, Cub Scouts, or work, you need to have information. You need to know about your stakeholders and your customers, and those can be your partners, internal. They can be customers. They can be any number of people. But without all of that information, if you don't have as much as you can, you're going to be making decisions, with limited information, and that just makes it so much harder. And today, I personally don't feel like our townspeople are adequately being heard. For me, there's no simple or easy way for residents to provide feedback to the Select Board, good or bad. Mm-hmm. And when I say feedback, I mean clear, transparent, and accountable feedback. So I attend BOS meetings. I've had conversations with residents that they've emailed or reached out to selectmen, and that it never gets brought up at the Board of Selectmen meetings, and that's disheartening. Right. I have to imagine that it's hard for residents to get in front of town on recorded video, making public comment. That's not for everyone. Right. Email, phone, that may be the best option for some. And it's rare when the BOS meetings have email or other comments presented. So I'm really passionate about figuring out a simple or easy mechanism for allowing all townspeople to be heard. And whatever we choose, and I'm not coming with the answer today. I'm talking more about the problem. But whatever solution we come up with, it needs to adhere to ADA guidelines. It needs to be able to reach aging and homebound residents. I mean, this is the 21st century. Our town has 8,000 residents. We're not talking about 800,000 residents. I refuse to believe that there's not a simple or easy solution to this. And I want to work with town members and figure out what we can do to resolve that.
Okay. Now I have just a follow up on the communication. At one time, the previous select boards were comfortable with giving out their own personal phone numbers, so residents could call you directly. And I don't know how you feel about that. I mean, is that maybe one of the things that you might consider? So they have direct contact with you instead of not having that information out there, or maybe your email. I don't know. Is that something that you would think about? So
first, I guess I don't want to speak for every selectman. I don't want to speak for every board. I don't want to set a precedence, right? Okay. With my actions. However, in this type of role, you're in service to the town, right? Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean you're answering your phone 24 hours a day. However, It does mean you need to be available to be heard. So even for work, I'll get calls and I can't pick them up or answer them within the next minute. But I will get back to the people. I will acknowledge that they've been heard. Even some of the feedback I hear is that there's no acknowledgement that their feedback has ever been received. I mean, then you don't really know how to manage a situation like that. So for me personally, I've got no issue with that, but I don't want to speak for other people. I do think that we have technology options today that can help alleviate that. Again, I don't want to don't want to necessarily, come in here with saying, this is how I'm going to change everything. I think first we need to acknowledge the problem and make sure people agree it's a problem. Because, if everyone thinks that everything's perfect, why would we go to change something? But, I believe that the feedback's going to be consistent, that we're not where we would like to be. And let's talk about options. And I think we can put all of those out there, whether it's technology, whether it's, some sort of system to, for people to be responsive on the select board. But I don't want to take actions like that without first not only speaking to townspeople, but also boards, because, there's implications for that. And these boards are not paid. They're either appointed or elected. They have day jobs. So we have to be respectful of that. But ultimately, I think that where we are today is not good enough. And I think we can do better. And I truly believe that there's, some simple and easy steps that we could take. And I look forward to being part of that solution.
Okay, very good. All right. Okay, so development in our town. It's a pretty hot topic going on these days.
Sizzling.
I think so. Now, we have an economic development plan that could be or should be the blueprint for our growth and perhaps tax relief. What would you do with this plan, and how would you get others on board?
I'm passionate about this also. The first thing when we talk about Lancaster is, there's got to be balance in any choice that we make. And that's a balance of rural character and economic initiative. And they need to be balanced, because without balancing both of those, we won't be Lancaster. But I truly believe that they are mutually exclusive. I mean, they're not mutually exclusive. I mean, we can have both, but it's something that we have to work towards. The economic development plan is an examination of Lancaster and its economic opportunities. But before I talk about the development plan, I'd like to first talk about the precursor to it, which is our town's master plan. So our town's master plan is our long-range planning guide. It's basically our town vision from where we were at when we did that to 20 to 25 years in the future. So our current master plan was put together in 2007. It includes, strategies and tactics. And putting that together, I had to believe, was an incredibly daunting task. But it does include the vision of our town. And our vision is one of heritage, open space, family, and community. And that, aligns perfectly with my vision for Lancaster. And like you mentioned, it does include, a blueprint. It talks about land use, economic development, transportation, open space, natural resources, and even historic preservation. Basically, the specifics on what we want Lancaster to be. So now we go to the economic development plan that was put together in 2015. And again, it's a transparent assessment, quantitative and qualitative, on Lancaster's economic base. And what that means is it includes our development opportunities. It has proposals and recommendations, as well as tactics for our existing opportunities. It's an extremely powerful document, and it has a lot of information in it. And what's super interesting is it does say that if Lancaster does not grow its commercial and industrial tax base over the next decade, and that decade being 2015 to 2025, the budget shortfall will end up being, the responsibilities of homeowners. And that just feels, surreal right now that, it's basically predicted exactly where we are today. So that's why I'm passionate about that, because it's got some information. But as you mentioned, how do we get others on board? I think there's a lot that goes into that. I talked about data. I talked about wanting to get information. I want to reevaluate our commercial and industrial tax base. Where are we with it? How far off are we? When you go into the economic development plan, it actually lays it out. It will lay out our partnering towns and where they're at, their tax base, where they're at. So when we get that sort of data, that helps us understand the pros and cons of each opportunity. And when I talk about pros and cons, there's always a balanced trade-off, economic versus culture. So we have to be, cognizant of that. But as I kind of mentioned early on, we need that data. We need the data, and we need to hear from town to be able to make the right choices for our town. And again, I believe that the balance is not mutually exclusive for open space, natural resources, as well as economic returns. And my fear, what I'm afraid of, is that we choose the wrong opportunity. It does not meet our town vision. It does not bring the proper economic return, meaning it has the wrong balance. and then it's a lost opportunity. We can't get that back. So for next steps, I want to have proper conversations around our financial data, a clear and transparent plan on next steps. And I'm not talking about, what is the next development. I'm talking about what is it that we need in the town? What is it that we're striving for? When we evaluate these projects, how do we know if they're the right fit? But we also need to make that happen. We need to bring together, our boards. That's planning board, Concom, FinCom. But we also have motivated townspeople. And I want to ask the question, why not us? Why not now? Other towns have figured this out. I mean, they've put together, committees to go through all of this, and they've been doing it for years. And ultimately, leadership must execute on all of those. It's not about saying we have a plan and then everyone just go in their silos. You have to work together. You need leadership. And that's how I look at development in our town. And I truly believe that my strengths in being able to execute and bring things together will help be a positive influence there.
Okay. Wow. Well, thank you for that. Okay. And so leading into this question about development, would you like to see more development in North Lancaster?
North Lancaster. So I believe so. I'm not an expert. The economic development plan, it actually outlines North Lancaster specifically. I want to, the spirit of this conversation, I want to be about balance. I'm going to continue to use that word, open space and economic development, specifically to North Lancaster. But the value of North Lancaster in particular is it can help increase our commercial and industrial zoned land. That's a huge opportunity. I mean, that's what the economic development plan talks about. But it can also provide jobs, services, and ultimately lessen the residential tax burden. I mean, that's kind of what we all want through this. But it does have its challenges. North Lancaster has existing challenges with water and sewer. The plan talks about what are all alternatives. We have an alternative in Lunenburg, but there's issues with the filtration of the water, and that would be an added cost. It mentions Shirley. Where do we stand with Shirley conversations on water? I'd like to know the formal outcomes of that. When we talk about sewer, there's an opportunity with Leominster, but I worry about how Lancaster, specific to the North Lancaster opportunity, how is our town driving this today? And speaking with townsfolk, we've got a critical issue that there's a lack of representation by Lancaster in town negotiations specific to water and sewer. So, and what I mean by that is, where can residents and committees go to get answers? We have an ad hoc town committee, but there's no point of contact for the sewer and water. And that's one of the biggest challenges for this program. So I'm disappointed to hear that we don't have a sewer and water point of contact for this community. And our unfortunate reality today is, North Lancaster did not pass our planning board. The project was also denied a state NEPA certificate, and it's my understanding that precludes the project from moving forward, and that's not good. I mean, nobody wants to have a proposal put forward and for it not to go through. I mean, we want our proposals to go through. We want to be unified in our boards and our conversations, and everyone to be on the same page. That makes everything so much easier. Mm-hmm. Now, also specific to North Lancaster, the economic development plan states, that North Lancaster ensure that appropriate design guidelines are in place, to retain the community character with adequate performance standards to protect the environment. So I find that interesting because the economic development plan wants Lancaster to make sure that we still consider the environment in our projects. And economics is, and I believe it's because economics is not just about money. It's about planning for the future and making trade-offs. So I do want to see, I think it's critical for Lancaster that we have development in North Lancaster, but it's got to be the right one. It can't be the wrong one. And it's important that we're transparent in that plan, and all the townspeople feel they've had a say in it, and making it the right choice for our town. Yeah.
Yes, it just seems like over the years this has been such a challenge for our town to figure out that balance, as you mentioned before, that word balance, to have development, tax relief, but to make sure it's not overwhelming to the town, the whole thing of sewer, water. It's just been something that's been going on for such a long time here in town. That would be a challenge for you if you get elected to kind of figure that out with the other boards in town for sure.
You use the word challenge. I'm an optimist. I prefer the word opportunity.
Okay.
It is a huge opportunity for our town. I mean, I'm excited. I think that there's a lot of things we're not talking about. On the financial sides.
Sure.
I'm looking forward to having the opportunity to be closer with that project.
Okay, and here's another interesting topic: 40B housing in town. How do you feel about that? What's going on?
Yeah, so I want to be on record. 40B is critical to our town. 40B is critical to the state of Massachusetts. That said, the wrong 40B can be devastating to our town and to our balance. And Lancaster does not have the best of history in 40B. I talked about our town's master plan. It actually has a vision. We have a vision for 40B. It includes some multifamily, some rentals, some single family, some 65 plus. It actually also calls for 20 plus units for persons with disabilities. I mean, I think that feels reasonable to me. That feels like an okay balance. But on the 40B front, we have a housing production plan that was put into place by residents, and that's a pipeline to meet state requirements for affordable housing. Really, really important. And I want to touch on how that happened. I mean, that was started by a single resident. It was fully accomplished by a smallish group of residents. But that sort of participation, that dedication, that's our Lancaster. When you see people stepping up and willing to do what it takes to move mountains there, I believe anything's possible. I mean, I don't think anyone will question our opportunities for participation. And what's really important about that production plan is we are now in the driver's seat for 40B. Instead of being at the mercy of unsolicited 40B projects, it basically allows us for safe harbor for 2 years. And as a public service announcement, there's a town meeting warrant at the June 22nd town meeting, and there is an article for forming an affordable housing trust. And why that's important is that it allows Lancaster permanent safe harbor status, and that's really where we want to be is in the town. And like I said, it allows us to be in the driver's seat for these 40B opportunities.
Okay. So being a safe harbor, what does that mean?
So we need to meet our 10% of housing for the critical number.
Okay, and so all right, could you explain the article maybe a little bit?
Sure. I'm not an expert on it.
Okay.
But basically, it creates an affordable housing trust, which is my understanding of how Lancaster will approach managing its affordable housing. And it kind of, you have to have the housing production plan in place, and then you able to create the trust to manage your affordable housing. And again, I'm not an expert in that. I've been following it, but it's important for us to be able to manage the 40B projects, and not if we're below the 10% threshold. That allows unsolicited 40B projects to come in.
Okay.
Basically, how I think about it is if our town doesn't have a plan, and we can't instill confidence in the state that Lancaster has a plan for 40B, then the state's going to manage our 40B, and they're going to allow other developers to come in and make choices for us. And we're on the right track now, and that's only because of the residents have stepped up and made that a reality.
Yeah, their voices are being heard and they're taking control. Excellent. Okay. All right. Now, this, again, another important topic for townspeople, property taxes. How do you address the continued increase in property taxes here in town?
That is a tough one. And, this is a specific money conversation. This doesn't involve open space. This doesn't involve historic preservation services or town projects. I mean, we're talking about, how do we limit property taxes? And what I want to do today, I can't do today, which is, deep dive into the town budget. At a macro level, the vast majority of our town budget, goes to schools, and schools are super important in my opinion. I believe it's one of the most valuable aspects of our town. I mean, all three of my kids have gone through our schools. I think in our school district, what I'm most proud of, is the music program. Mr. Rossley, Miss Bellimer, and Mr. McCarthy, they're all phenomenal. They're just a true gift to our town. So, from the budget perspective, the schools are super important. But when we talk about, the remaining budget, we have options. The options are, and I'm not here to say which option we should or shouldn't take, but the options are, to cut spending, or, we can increase our commercial and industrial tax base. And I think we've talked a little bit about that with finding the right opportunities in town to help alleviate that. I've talked about, we have a master plan of the vision of what we see Lancaster to be. We have an economic development plan, which is basically the options to get there. We need to bring both of those together and evaluate where we stand today. I mean, the first question I want to ask is, how far off are we? Are we talking about $1,000, $100,000, and $1 million, or $1 million? And what is our trend? I'm a little bit of a numbers guy, as you can probably tell.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see some trend lines and graphs. I mean, are we talking about a linear growth? Hopefully not a logarithmic growth. Like what direction are we trending, and how do we stop that trend and make sure that we're moving in the right direction? And it's hard for me. This question is really hard for me to answer because I don't have a lot of information, and I want to get to that information, and that's in the town budget. And I'm looking forward to being able to understand, because there's trade-offs there. I mean, we want services in our town. Our senior center, I think, is fantastic. It's well run. The pancake breakfasts when we're having them, are great. So I want to make sure we enable that, but we have to figure out a way to pay for all of it. And one opportunity is North Lancaster. There's other commercial industrial opportunities, but we as a town, hearing from the townspeople to see what they want is what we have to figure out. But we can't just hear from certain citizens. We have to hear from the breadth of our citizens, because we have ranges of income. We have, ranges of situations, and it's important we hear from all of them. One thing I'd also like to do is, we've talked a lot about development today. What was our best development project in town? What are we most proud of? What were we most successful with? So when we review something like that, we can learn, what did we do well? What other opportunities align with how we achieve that? And I don't think we're talking about that, because, our best project is what we want to mimic. We want more of that. We can also look at our worst projects and go, we want less of that. But we're not having those conversations. We're not talking about, when we made this choice about this opportunity, now we know that was a bad idea. Once you create transparency there, then we'll be sure not to make that again. And I don't have that information today, and I want to really dive deep in the financials. And if we had a development opportunity that brought in a tremendous amount of tax base, we want to do more of that. If people love how it looks out in the town, we want more of that. And I just don't have that information today. And kind of where I'm going with this is, I believe that, Lancaster is lacking the leadership to bring all this together. We need to be able to execute, right? We have those plans, but they're not going to work themselves. We need to bring our committees together. We need to lead them to where we want to be. And we need the metrics and the data to understand where it is we need to go. So that's my plan for how I would approach property taxes. I don't think there's any silver bullet to decide it today. But I definitely think we need to dive a little deeper into the money and understand, where we're spending things and making sure it's in the right places, and then figure out how we can alleviate our trend line.
Okay. Well, all right. One last question. Are you willing to make the tough choices for the betterment of Lancaster and its residents? That to me is a hard thing to do, because you have all kinds of influences coming at you all the time. So, and sometimes you just have to make tough choices. So are you willing to do that?
Absolutely. I think my strengths align with the role of selectman. I think I'm a good listener. I think I ask pertinent and pointed questions. I think I do a really good job of articulating pros and cons. I mean, all of our opportunities and all of our choices, every one of them has a pro and a con. And we all need to understand what they are. I think those strengths will help us understand our trade-offs, because there are trade-offs in every one of our opportunities. I don't feel like that's happening today, but I do want to be part of that solution. On the team building front, I truly feel that I can, unify the town's direction and purpose. We need to bring together our committees and boards, and that's not happening today. I go to the meetings, I hear it. It won't be easy, and it will take time. But ultimately, we want to strive for a culture of respectful collaboration. We can't battle ourselves. That's not productive. But you talked about, making choices, and that's what leadership is. You can't make everyone happy all of the time, but you can be transparent. You can articulate the pros and the cons and why you're making those choices. But most importantly, you need to be able to learn from those choices. And if you don't revisit and look at the things that didn't go well, you're bound to repeat them. And I'm just, I make lots of mistakes. I'm not interested in making the same mistake twice. So I spend a lot of time, evaluating, retrospective is what we call it, and work to help ensure that, you don't make those continually make those mistakes. And it does happen, mistakes will happen, but, I believe through conversation, collaboration, and communication, we can overcome that.
Okay. All right. Well, I really want to thank you for coming on Journeys. This is a special edition of my show. And so I want to remind people that voting is on June 29th, I do believe. And I just actually read something that the voting is going to be condensed for us. I get noon to 6 or something.
7,
like
noon to 6 or 7, yes.
Yeah, something
like that. You can do early voting, and you can do mail-in ballots.
Right.
Everyone go out and vote, whomever it's for. Exercising your right and choice is super, super important.
Exactly.
So please, take every opportunity to vote. Actually, an email just came out from the town clerk setting up that process. So if you haven't gotten that email, you can reach out to Diane Reardon, clerk's office, and she'll definitely help.
Gotta vote. Gotta get
Absolutely.
out there and vote. I would like to welcome Stanley Star, who is running for re-election for a 3-year seat on the Lancaster Selectboard. Welcome, Stanley. I appreciate you coming on to my show.
Appreciate the opportunity to share some of my background and thoughts.
Awesome. Okay, so before we get started into talking about the reasons you're running, can you tell us a little about who you are? I believe it would be helpful for any new residents to get to know your background as a resident of town and your role as a current board member, as the chair, actually, of the board. So it's all yours.
Okay, thank you. No, I moved to Lancaster just about 20 years ago. I grew up in neighboring Clinton, so I was obviously very familiar with the area and a lot of the people that have found their way from one town to another, and certainly enjoy my stay here in Lancaster. I have a wife and a son and a daughter. My formal education-wise was at Worcester State College. Now it's Worcester State University, where I got my Bachelor's of Arts and my Master's degree at. In terms, I've been self-employed investment advisor for the past 35 years. I previously served as the hospital administrator at Tufts University's Animal Hospital and grant and contract administrator at UMass Medical Center prior to that point in time. My initial involvement in Lancaster was back in, first moved in the year 2001. And I probably at one point had interfaced with yourself, Denise, too, on a couple of things. The Lancaster Cultural Council was the first involvement, and followed by a member of the Lancaster FinCom for a period of time. But I had spent nearly 8 years as a member of the Clinton Finance Committee. So that combined with the other one puts me about a 10-year time frame with that, what I think is a very, very important board. I do serve as a board of directors for a short time with the beginning of the Lancaster Community Center. I've served a term as the town moderator, And for the past 7 years, as you mentioned, as select board member and the chairman for the past 5 years. Lastly, and you don't hear enough of me here, I'm a trustee at the Dr. Franklin Perkins School and a board of director with the Clinton Savings Bank. And I'm involved with the community. I have been for a long, long time, and I believe in giving back.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, so let's get into some of the questions I have for you. First one is the Finance Committee, a very important committee in town. They do develop a budget and recommend that budget to the board. How has your relationship over the last few years developed? All right, you want to answer? Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Did you have some more there?
Yeah, I was just going to just follow up with another question. Do you feel that it is an important alliance to have, to make sure that our town finances are in order?
Absolutely. As I just alluded to in a moment ago, I've served on 2 FinComs, one in Clinton and one now in Lancaster, the time frame. It's extremely important, critical to the movement. They're the board that oversees, gets the big picture. They see all departmental budgets. They're able to coordinate that more so than any individual departments. Well, let's face it, every board wants more. And unfortunately, we're going into an extremely critical situation coming into this new year, not just for the reasons of what we're here doing this on Zoom, with the coronavirus, but dollars and cents, fiscal responsibilities. We have a very good functioning FinCom, in my opinion. I've worked with a lot of folks over the years and other towns, as I said, as well. And it's just a major fiscal responsibility for these folks to do the job. And it's a difficult one. When you have to say no to people, you're never very popular. But, you know, someone has to. And generally, it appears that people at town meetings accept that wisdom, that input, because they do their homework. And I think we're very fortunate to have a board, including the FinCom, is part of this town that, again, is very functionally sound. I couldn't say more enough about it.
Okay. Yeah, now, I have a question that wasn't on the list of questions I sent to you, and that's kind of because when you were talking about the coronavirus, some of the changes that are going to happen regarding our budget, perhaps with some of the changes like with schools, you know, maybe more kids are going to be home, you know, learning at home. So maybe that changes the budget for the school system. I mean, I guess there's a lot of things that are going to change in how we look at the budget. I mean, have you talked to the Finance Committee at all about that possibility, or is it too soon really to look at that stuff?
As you probably know now, Denise, there's more questions than there are answers. Nobody knows when and how long. It's not good. It is not good for our town. It's not good for any town at this juncture. We'd be very premature in trying to factor in something that we're going to face a structural deficit. There's no question about it. When you have a town, not that we have a lot of industry, that's part of other situational things, but our state, I think immediately of Kimball's. About 3-4 years ago, I initiated the meals tax. I don't know why we didn't have one. Kimball's was not around then, but that and several other places in town gives $50,000 approximately a year for income just on meals tax. And most people don't object paying 3, 4, 5 cents on a $10 bill. It's just part of the bill. That's going to be reduced. I mean, granted, it's a very small part of the budget, but the last I had heard is collections for state purposes, excise taxes. Now, you can say that because of the delay, some of the state taxes have not been paid, but last I heard, there was a substantial shortfall in the month of April, which is typically the most important. But again, for reasons of delay, it's not all in that fault. It's not good. We're not going to get the state aid we've had in the past. There's possibilities if that gets cut, we get loss in road taxes or road usage types of fees. We have to do something within our town to create more opportunities to reduce our liabilities. And at this point, I don't think we're overstaffed in any position that I'm aware of. Anyone can make an argument, perhaps, that might be some here, might be some there, but I don't believe in it. We've got some very, very good employees. They're dedicated. Their heart's in the right place. I've worked with them very, very carefully and over the years, too. So I can't stress enough how important it's going to be for the town of Lancaster to get commercial development in North Lancaster. And I know we probably will talk that down a little bit down the road. There's 400 acres of prime territory there. It's close to Route 2. It's the best that I know of in our town and most substantial size for us to reduce the tax burden on real estate tax owners. If there's one complaint I hear consistently from my folks who speak with, it's why are my taxes continuing to go up as much as they have been? That's the consistent sort of argument and complaint. And I see it in my own neighborhood, people leaving here. The kids get educated in Neshoba, an outstanding system. They're not going to want to pay those taxes that are coming through because they move elsewhere and they don't have to, unfortunately. So it's, I don't know how else to stress it more than I already have in the past in open sessions too. It's important. FinCom's important. They can't create money, nor can we. What we have done in addition, and I'm kind of overlapping a couple of things here,
That's okay.
besides the meals tax, one of the most important things I've initiated, and I'll say I, because I really worked close with the town treasurer, Mary Frost, and we talked about setting monies aside for the retirees of our community, the town retirees. We didn't have a dime in that particular fund that I had suggested that the state does. It's called the PRIM fund, the Pension Reserve Investment Management. We started, I think, approximately 5 years ago to put monies in. We have just over $2 million in it. We're so far, this is the positive of our town fiscal situation. And that's, again, thanks to finance directors, to Cheryl Garapes, who's extremely good in what she does. We've got that invested solely in the PRIM. We don't take any undue risks that are necessary. We've earned through the end of last year about 6% per year on our investments. That gets us about maybe 2/3 of the way of what we're going to be needing to pay our retirees. That's their pension. That's what they're going to be living on. Where is it going to come from? Then the last I had heard, the approximate amount of needs for that is around $3 million, 3 point something million. It changes routinely based upon where the monies are currently, what they've earned, et cetera. So that is something that's extremely important. So we've done that on an annual basis. It hurts. It could go elsewhere. Yeah, it could. But who is going to take care of the retirees who are entitled by law to get this post, they call it OPEB, other post-employment benefits. That's the term, OPEB. The other thing we looked at last year and the year before was working with our fire chief, and specifically on the EMTs, and making sure that the rates that we have charging for our ambulance services are brought up to date. They were 5, 6, and 7 years old. We were way behind our neighboring towns. We're not here to gouge anyone, but we're also here not to give it away and cause more pain for the town of Lancaster's residents, plain and simple. Another avenue we had looked at and took care of, in my opinion, was that in building fees, the inspection fees that were in, again, they just hadn't been paid attention to for a long time. Inflation alone brings it up, and I think we were low to begin with. So that's another area that was addressed and taken care of, the OPEB I mentioned, and the meals tax. I wish there was other ones that are so obvious enough to say, we got to do this to get that. And if anybody in TV land and Facebook land has ideas of where we're missing things, please let us know, because we're happy to it. I think we have a very competent staff, and if they haven't thought of it yet, then maybe it just isn't there. I'm a little off track perhaps on this one,
Okay.
but I feel very, very strong about this. I'm really concerned about our town this coming year and next year. We're going to be in fiscal challenges, major ones.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry to be so depressive, but
No,
Sometimes factor-
it's realistic, though, I think, because, we need that revenue. We need something to come in to help with all of what you just spoke about. So, I understand it. Okay, let's move on to your relationship with the townspeople. How do you feel that has been over the past few years? And do you feel you need to improve any communications between your board and the townspeople and maybe other boards?
I think the straightforward answer to that is everyone can improve communications between residents, between boards, whatever. It's up to the folks that are on those individual boards to do what they think is right and be communicative with their folks. I've always welcomed input. I never act as an island and just say, I know better than what you know, or I think I have more insight than you do. If I'm in doubt, I will always contact folks that I trust, who are impartial in my opinion. We've come down sometimes to town meetings, as you're probably aware of, to make decisions when it could have been made solely by the select board. That's correct. But I wanted more inclusive and get a better picture to make sure what we're doing is in line with what the majority of people is. And in any town, in any organization, you're not going to please everyone.
Right.
You try your best. I'm not coming in, never came in with an agenda. Some folks may have and have in the past. They're there for one reason. They're not there for the right reason. I love my community. I want to do whatever is necessary to make this a better community and make it sound. We need that. As I said, and communication always is important. Sometimes people hear you, sometimes people don't. Sometimes they're selective and sometimes they're not. That's life, let's face it. Maybe hopefully I'm not to that degree, but who knows. But I guess that's I've always reached out, even in areas now the select board's not involved with directly. And I can't tell many people saying my road needs to be repaved. What about the school budgets going out of hands? We don't have control of that at the select board level, but it doesn't mean that we can't put some input to the folks who do have inputs on it to at least share the concerns that we're hearing, if they haven't already heard it from elsewhere. In my personal, like Kevin Bartlett at BPW, I think I've got a very good relationship with him and with their board. And they've been cooperative right along, even though they're not reportable to us and they're their own people. You still need to work with one another, and I'll never be an island and just think that what I think is what everyone should think. And I got to tell you, over the 7 years I've served on the select board, and prior to that point, I've attended approaching 1,000 meetings, believe it or not. Do the multipliers, number of meetings in the course of a month and a year. I couldn't believe it when I did it. And not just select board, but just all the committees, all the councils, all the involvements I've had. Exterior to Lancaster, we have tri-town meetings held on a regular basis, at least we did. It was amazing when I sat down and figured it out that I'm pushing 1,000 meetings. You learn. It's called experience. Sometimes you learn what you shouldn't do as much as what you should do. And that's where I try to listen more than talk, even though on this case I'm doing more of the talking here based on questions on it too. But that's how I feel. So I don't know of anyone, again, that I've never ever neglected to say, I don't want to speak with you because you're totally wrong. I've always engaged people. I've always listened. And what else can a person do to get that experience?
Right. Okay. Okay. All right. Let's go to development in our town. Pretty hot topic these days of discussion. And we do have an economic development plan, which I think is our blueprint for growth in tax relief. And I'm wondering, have you used the plan for any development here in town? And if so, what is the pros and cons of trying to do this work?
Yeah, I think the plan itself had just come into life in the last year or so. It was done some time ago. I'm not sure it was ever officially acceptable to the town. And maybe I'm thinking of the housing and getting the two intertwined in here. But obviously, any town needs a plan. You need a track to run on. And a lot of work was put in by a lot of folks to make that happen. Our obvious location is the zone in North Lancaster,
right?
The iPod. And there is ongoing conversation with the Capital Group developers who took over from several other people in the past. I believe they're reputable. I believe we need to and have to work with developers. But first and foremost, it's the town of Lancaster's needs that has to come first and foremost. But it doesn't mean you need to be confrontational. It means you've got to be collaborative in anything you deal with, whether it's that company or any other companies. We want to welcome commercial development because we have to have that in our town. Right now, our tax base is predicated only on 8% commercial. 8, as in less than 9. That's very low. We want to keep our bucolic town. Nobody wants development if they didn't have to. Who's going to pay the bills? There isn't a better location than North Lancaster, accessibility to Route 2, for this to happen. That's how it was zoned, not by me, but others in the past. That's what we're working with. That's the blueprint. We have to work within it. Should it be tweaked to 10 years or so later? Absolutely. To meet the needs of the community and meet the needs of things that change. Who knew what was going to happen 10 years ago? Who knew what was going to happen month before last, literally, on some of these things. So you got to be flexible. You got to work with. It's absolutely critical. I look at the neighboring town of Sterling, which I think is very similar size to Lancaster. They're double the size in commercial development base. I don't want to keep burden real estate owners in this community with the bulk of the increases for taxes. It's not fair. It's too disproportionate. We have to expand it. That's absolutely critical. And even more so with, talk about excise taxes and gasoline taxes and whatever comes out from the Commonwealth. We've been shut down as a country for the last 2 months. And going forward, it's just, I can't help but think about what's going to happen in the next, by year end, what we're going to be in fiscal shape. It's not good, Denise. It's not good. There's nothing I can see positive about what's been happening here. And more challenging is that no one knows when this is going to end. And you alluded to it earlier, how are things going to change? They will unfortunately change. The human part of contacts are going to be dissipating. We'll be waving to each other across the street to keep our 25 feet distance when that all happens, and put ourselves in bubbles. It's very difficult. It's very, very difficult, and it's just not getting any better. So it's critical for development in North Lancaster to get that completed for the benefit of this community.
So do you have any thoughts on how to go forward? I mean, with the boards, the other boards that are involved with zoning and letting proposals go through. I mean, how do you feel that you can encourage that to happen?
I think that's the word you just used, encourage. We don't have, our job was to accept and pass on to the planning board, the zoning board, the conservation commissions to do what they do. We don't do those things on the select board. We never have, we never will. If they want input from us, we're happy to give it to them, but it's their jurisdiction. They're voted into office. We don't tell them what to do. They don't tell us what to do. We will cooperate. I will personally certainly attend any meeting that someone would have. So it's critical for those boards to understand what's going on. I've gotten some recent information a couple, 3 days ago from the developers I asked for. They're telling us on their initial plan that it could bring to the town of Lancaster $3 million a year. That's not net profit. That's gross. Okay, whatever expenses happen for the result of that one. If in fact they have to change the program that they initially thought would be acceptable, and they got a special permit or work with the planning board specifically to make some arrangements that are acceptable to both sides. I don't represent anyone. I represent out of Lancaster in my role. So it's kind of on the sidelines in this case. The second best option, as I understand it, which is a version not of the first one, but a little scaled down version, would bring approximately $1.6 or $1.7 million as a result of our taxes. Our real estate taxes are $19.85. Now, mind you, please, these are all projections. They're nothing firm yet. They have a lot of things in the works that they're willing to go forth, but right now it's just stymied. There's nothing happening. The last option, the least favorable to the town and to the developers, it's a lose-lose on that one, in my opinion, is about a $700,000 benefit to the town, minus whatever expenses come into the town, perhaps with additional personnel, whether it's police, fire safety, and the like. BPW could be another part of it too. That's a major difference. 700 to 1.4 to 3. We desperately need income, not at the expense of our community, but to enhance and just cover what's going to be a deficit going forward. And think of the things that can do. You can put more ball fields in. You can help develop senior housing, which is another thing that's desperately needed, in my opinion, in this town, this community. We can do so many things other than what we're able to do right now. Staffing right now, I think, is bare bones. I shudder to think if this becomes as bad as I hope it doesn't, people will be laid off. I don't know what the options are. What other alternatives are there? If you don't have money in the bank, you can't pay on good hopes. You just can't do it. That's the issue that I can't stress enough. Been through this war for the last 7 years. It's not gotten any better. And I think it's only going to grow worse. I hate to sound like doom and gloom, but once again, it's what I see, it's what I fear, and it's got to be addressed. And one major way to address it is to work with developers, not just in North Lancaster. There's other sites that are being worked on. We can't come across as a town that nobody wants to work with. And guess what? There are other places these folks can go. We're not the exclusive. We're not exclusivity here, except for the ones that own the North Lancaster. Work with them. Get the money that this town desperately needs to spread out the tax base. Don't lose the rural character of the town of Lancaster. No one's looking to put up a dump on that site. No one's looking to put up things that are offensive to this community. But there's got to be some practicality interjected in this conversation.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, I'll get off my stump now.
No, thank you. Thank you. Well, I guess actually we've kind of gone over some of the other questions I had for you. I guess we talked about property taxes. Obviously, you don't have a whole lot you can do with that. Just in terms of trying to get more revenue into town to help with property taxes. What about the 40B housing in town? I mean, that's something that everybody seems to have an opinion about. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, the opinions I hear, Denise, is no one wants the very large development that's being proposed on his Goodrich Estates. I haven't had anyone say to me, thank God they're here to do what they do. I have not heard that, and chances are I probably won't. What controls, what can the town of Lancaster do to control, to mitigate things? Probably not a lot. It's a necessity, but it's a mandate. We have no control of it. We've got to get to 10% of our housing, as everyone knows. And much as you don't want to see it take off with one giant bite and to be so disproportionate in a neighborhood that, again, that nobody I know is in favor of, how do you do it? Well, you do the best you can with the boards that are working on that project. They have to follow the rules, though, much as they may not like it. The signs are there that the state says you're going to do this, you're going to do it. You don't have any choice in it. You're mandated. We're not going to get fined as a town for not doing it. I don't like this site. I think it's overwhelmingly. We do have an active group of people, as you know, that are working their best to find other locations for this 40B development and keep ourselves within the safety zone, the safe harbor for that development. So it's a necessity. It's a mandate. I don't like mandates. Anybody telling the town what we should or shouldn't do, what we can or cannot do within our own bounds. But that's the way it is, because that's what the legislature has voted on, and that's what we have to adhere to. So all I can say is we can continue to do to mitigate as best we can. There is a suit against the ability to have that particular project to be given water and sewage, as I understand it. It's still in a court session, which may be for months to come. I don't know. The latest is I haven't heard anything more about it. It's just in a holding pattern. So yes, it's important to have it. You'd like to be able to have the town to do it in the way that they feel most fit, and not in one fell swoop go from X% to the minimum available. It's not good for the community. It's just, and I don't know what else to say beyond that one. It's
not easy. It's certainly not easy at all.
I found out, Denise, life in general isn't easy. So.
Well,
at the Boston, Denise, I'll just finish that. Let's hope we can stabilize that situation, however it happens. If the court case is lost, then unfortunately it's there, but it will finally reach the point where we had to be mandated to reach to get, or very close to it.
Okay. All right. Lot on your plate there, Stanley, for sure, huh?
There's never a dull moment, Denise. Time is only good thing about it when you're into these kind of situations where we are now. The day goes by fast.
Oh yeah, I bet.
Sometimes too fast.
Yeah.
And I got to mow my lawn today.
Yep. Me too. Okay. One last question I have. How do you think the townspeople feel about your leadership? Do you feel they can continue to trust in your leadership? To trust that you'll make tough choices for the betterment of the town and its residents?
Yep. You can't please everybody all the time, right? You do your best. You lead by example, which is what I've always done. I kind of showed in the involvements I've had in the past with town involvements and outside activities and communities, which I believe very, very strongly of. We look at my track record. Look at my background. What experience? We need experience. And it's not going to make it any easier, but it'll make it less difficult if that's a difference I can make in terms of where we're going. I'd like to think, because I get input from folks, and I know there's folks out there, and there always will be. I mean, they crucified someone else who didn't believe in what they were doing, too, at some point in time. So I'm not naive enough to think that I should be loved by all. But I want to be respected for what work I do for this town. I didn't come in with an agenda, and nor have I ever gotten that either. So that's... I think it's there, at least input that I get from folks who don't even solicit that informationally too. Are we running out of time here, Denise?
We have plenty of time.
Okay. So again, I peruse my track record, see what I've done, see if I've been receptive to listening to people,
right,
and more importantly, reacting to them. It may not always positive, and it's not always positive. We know that. But I'm there. They know how to reach me. And
right.
By nature, I'm a listener. I want to help. I want to do what's best for my community. I love this town, and I want to make it as good as I can make it. If the folks choose to think that there's someone else who can do a better job, fine, that's their right, and that's their privilege. And they should get out and vote, regardless of who it's for any offices that are being run. So I'm not naive to think that, it's only me and me only. And the very, very difficult choices coming up for this town.
Right. Well,
Who do you want to run it?
and I commend you for wanting to continue to stay with the town and work through these issues. It just, I know how the town is. I know how difficult sometimes it is to get things done, and it's a lot being on a board, and especially being a chair of the select board. So I commend you for that, Stanley, for sure.
Thank you. Thank
Hard
you.
work. Hard work.
It is, and I do take it very serious, Denise. This is not a casual involvement. There's not a day that goes by that I'm not involved in some matter with the town of Lancaster. And you know what? We're not even going to go up on our rates either for being on the select board. We're going to keep them at 0.
Okay.
That's our salaries.
I know.
It doesn't pay to be a selectman. It costs to be a select person.
Yeah, it's a tough position, but I'm sure there's a lot of people who are appreciative of what you do.
I concur.
So, if people do want to reach out to you, best way is through the town website?
Yeah, the best way probably is email in my stanstar1@gmail. That's probably the most convenient. And for me, with my business, I'm still working on I do have a gainful employment still. I don't have, unfortunately, the luxury of having every day, what am I going to do next? It's like, what aren't I going to be able to finish? But I will always respond to people regardless.
And are you guys still holding board meetings, right? Are you?
We mostly the inefficiency of Zoom. Last time was probably the most difficult meeting I've ever had in my life a couple of weeks ago. We are going to meet this coming Monday at noon hour with the proper distancing too, because we have to go into executive session as well. That was just posted this morning. So only if we have to, Denise, the ability to talk like we are now and to interact with people you need to interact with is just not there. It's just not the same. But sometimes things are important enough that need to be spoken directly to an individual.
Okay.
Rather than perfunctory.
How are you guys putting agendas together? Just is that difficult to do?
No, it's coordinated through the town administrator.
Oh, okay.
Rocco, that's where they go.
Yep.
Ours, again, it was just posted this morning because we're meeting next Monday right about this time. And, let's grant it, when we're trying to get things done that have to get done because this budget, something called the annual town meeting, that was supposed to be held a couple of days ago.
Right.
We think now, June, your guess is as good as mine if that's going to happen. So it's priorities. You got to think about the priorities. Some people are thinking that this particular aspect is so important, and maybe in their mind it is. The bigger picture, the fiscal health, the elections, how we handle this virus situation as our town. Those are priorities right now.
Right.
It doesn't mean you ignore everything else, but you have to prioritize.
Yes.
And I'm not going to do the job of the planning board. I'm not going to do the job of the zoning board of appeals. I'm not going to do the job of a building inspector. I'm not going to job of the school committee. That's not mine. That's not our responsibility. If asked and they want our input, I'm happy to share it. But I don't invade elected officers. That's not right, any more than I would expect them to tell us what we should be doing,
Right.
as insightful as they think they might be.
All right, Sandy. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on my show and letting the townspeople know who you are, what you're all about, what the town is up against right now. I thought it was very informative, and I appreciate that.